Welcome to Castle Combe, where we are going to find out what is Autocar's favourite driver's car of 2017. Now, what I'm interested in is what they like to drive, so we don't care what they look like, we don't care about what they're like inside, we don't care about the price, we just care which one is the nicest to drive. Dan, what's on your radar?
I'm looking forward to driving the Caterham Donington Edition because Sevens are always fantastic on track. And on the other extreme, I want to know what the big, heavy, powerful Mercedes E63 Estate car is like around Castle Combe.
Fair play. Mario, mate?
I'm going with the GT3 because Porsche have won more handling days than any other manufacturer. I'm also really looking forward to having a go in the 720S because I've heard a sneaky rumour that that's actually quicker than the P1, and I really want to have a go in the M4 because they always get a kick in and I want that to be a good car.
Fair enough. All right, we'll get on.
We run an annual competition to name Britain's best driver's car since 1989. And this year, like in that very first year, we went to Castle Combe to do it. Combe is a scary old circuit. For one, it's very fast. And for two, there's very little runoff. But it's also a great circuit, really bumpy, and with a mix of cambers and corners, it's seriously good for assessing a road car.
First up is the second most powerful car in the test, which seems absurd given the company it's in and the fact that it is ultimately a family estate car.
So, the E63 AMG S. Now that S is very important because that means that this is the fastest E-Class Mercedes have ever made. 604 horsepower, 604, and 627 pounds-foot of torque. Think about that number for a minute, that is absolutely ridiculous. It's not a light car, 2,060 kilograms. It's wet today, and this car feels all of those 2,060 kilograms in these conditions. But it is a very fast car, 0 to 60, 3.5 seconds, limited as all fast Mercedes are to 155. Take that limiter off, and this is a 200-mile-an-hour car. It's four-wheel drive now for the E-Class. You can put it into rear-wheel drive, which we will do a bit later.
In four-wheel drive mode, it has so much straight-line performance that you arrive everywhere carrying way more speed than you expected. It may be extremely big and heavy, and yes, it does slip and slide around a little, but in these sodden conditions, it's one of the most approachable cars here.
This thing has got a 9-speed gearbox, 9 speeds, that is absolutely ridiculous. It's running on the new and very much respected Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres that replace the Super Sports. They're meant to be better in the wet. They're certainly better in the wet than the Pilot Sport Cup 2s, and actually, they do feel better in the wet than the Super Sports. These brakes, they don't feel, I'm not getting a load of confidence from these brakes. I've probably done 4 laps and the pedal has gone long, very long.
The star performer of any AMG is its engine. Here, a 4-litre V8 with hot turbos, ostensibly the same unit as you'll find in both the Aston DB11 and the AMG GT-R, but here it makes more power than in either of them. So let's see what happens when you put it into rear-wheel drive mode.
At the moment, it seems everybody is having a little gimmick of giving us the drift mode. AMGs have always been about having fun. They've often been criticised for being not quite as sharp as their M cousin, as it were. And to be fair, that was a fair criticism. And when Mercedes made this thing four-wheel drive, I got a bit upset. I was thinking, no, I love AMGs because they are sideways absolutely everywhere. I did a world record once in an AMG. I got a world record for the world's longest drift. So I've swallowed a brave pill and I've now put it into rear-wheel drive. Probably a stupid idea. It's absolutely soaking today. This thing has got 604 horsepower. And I'm pleased to report this car becomes a different animal when you've got it in rear-wheel drive. You can really feel that diff at the back pushing it sideways. This is a fast corner here. Okay, let's see what it does. Quite a tricky one. Turn in, slow it down a bit. Power. Can we go over through the corner? Yeah, look at that. Through the corner all the way. Oh man, that's transformed the car for me now. I'm one of those guys. I know everyone says, oh, why do you need to drift the car everywhere? But being able to drift the car, it really, really lets you exploit the car's natural balance. And in four-wheel drive mode, it just didn't move around on the edge like how I like a car to move around. And this is handling day. This is about how a car handles, how it entertains a driver. And once you've got this thing in rear-wheel drive, it is back to being an entertaining car. All of a sudden, you've got an adjustability you didn't have. You've got a playfulness you didn't have in four-wheel drive. You've got a scariness you didn't have, going through the fastest corner on the track there, and it just started to step out of touch. I was in 5th gear. Here we go, yes. Oh, that's it. That is how I like my AMGs. Yeah, my message to you, if you buy one of these cars, just leave it in rear-wheel drive mode.
Also rear-wheel drive and with a grunty turbocharged engine is BMW's 87 grand M4 CS.
This is the model that sits between the mainstream M4 competition and the completely mad, completely unhinged M4 GTS. I think what you're about to watch is several minutes of a very frightened man driving very slowly around a slippery and extremely scary circuit. So this is the model that borrows some of the parts from the GTS to make it faster, to make it lighter, more agile, make it a bit sharper than the standard M4 and the M4 competition. And so that means this car is about 35 kilos lighter than the competition, not a huge amount. And it's still 1580 kilos at the curb. It's still close to 1600 kilograms, this car. So let's not go pretending it's a lightweight track machine. It's also got more power than the competition, 454 brake horsepower. It'll do 0 to 60 in sub 4 seconds, 3.9 to 62 in fact, which for a rear-driven car like this is really, really fast.
Last year at this contest we had the even more focused GTS along. I was one of the few who absolutely loved it, and there are similarities between these two cars. They're both set up stiffly with very little understeer, direct and responsive steering, and then loads of oversteer if you want it. In the wet though, with the CS you get oversteer whether, frankly, you want it or not.
It's less than 10 degrees outside and there's no grip at all. It's compounded because this car's on Michelin Cup 2 tyres, which are just struggling so much. I'm driving the car in comfort mode. I've got the softest suspension setting just to try and help the chassis find some grip. I've also got the stability control system on entirely, and even so, the car's just slipping and sliding. The front end will push, massive understeer there, and then it'll slide there, and then I'll try and get the power down and it'll slide again. Really, you're just holding on. I've driven this M4 CS enough in the dry to know that it's a big improvement on an M4 competition. BMW say the only difference chassis-wise, apart from the Cup 2 tyres, is software. So apparently all the chassis settings, all the spring rates and damper rates are all the same. I'm not persuaded by that, I have to say, because I think the chassis feels so different to any other M4 that I've driven. What you've got in this car, in the dry, and particularly on the road, is body control, especially over the rear axle. The car's just more settled, it's more composed than a standard M4 or the M4 competition, which they've been getting better and better year on year, but they're still wild things to drive.
I really wanted the M4 CS to be good, but the reality is somewhat different. Unless you've got the skill, the commitment and the bravery to grab it by its horns in these wet conditions, it's actually pretty horrifying.
Particularly in these conditions, there's something about the throttle calibration that's really, really tricky to judge. You seem to give it half throttle and you just get all the boost. The engine lights up, the turbos spool up even more, and then you just break traction and the car slides. Let's see what happens if we get into M dynamic mode. So halfway house, yeah, it will, would you believe it, it will slide. It's quite a nice mode this. You've still got some safety net there, but it just lets the car go a little bit so you can get it moving around this circuit. It goes track, grass, tyre wall. There's no runoff whatsoever. So system's fully off. Is this going to end in a terrible crash? It will drift beautifully actually, this car. You've got to measure that throttle input, that first throttle input, but come on, it's an M car, of course it drifts. Can't argue with that, can you? And it's a shame because I think this is the best M4 ever. It's just so hard to appreciate that when there's so little grip.
To the Honda Civic Type-R, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
300-ish horsepower hot hatchback, and we've also got near 600 horsepower. We've got 700 horsepower supercars here. So that's the beauty of our annual sort of handling day challenge. It doesn't matter how fast a car is. What matters is what it does to you in here, how it makes you feel. And that is why, over the years, not always the fastest car wins. And the Civic is our favourite hot hatch of the moment. It is the hatch du jour, isn't it? Because this generation Civic gets multi-link rear end rather than a torsion beam. The previous Gen 1 was just a little bit one-dimensional at times. It was really fast around the Nordschleife, but slightly irritating around the North Circular. This one has got a broader remit, if you like. It's meant to be more comfortable at one end of things, but also more agile and faster at the other extreme of things.
According to the engineers, every scoop, every wing has a specific job to play in how this thing goes. Can I feel them actually doing their thing? I'm not sure. But what I can feel is that clever front diff finding grip where, frankly, today, it had no right to.
It's a lot of power to put through the front wheels, this, isn't it? It's a lot of torque to put through the front wheels as well, but the Civic is pretty clever suspension-wise. Doesn't break into understeer very easily. It's quick in a straight line, revs to about 7. It's quite an engaging noise. It does feel agile. I like it. I like this car quite a lot. Maybe a bit less than some of my colleagues who think it's the best hot hatchback in years, and it's got such an able, capable chassis.
Not everybody is a fan of the Civic Type-R, but I am an advocate. For me, it has a perfect blend of adjustability and stability, and in these wet conditions, it has masses of grip and bundles of performance, enough to give the much more powerful BMW M4 CS a hard time around a lap.
And it has, but I slightly miss some of the old delicacy that the just departed Renault Megane, Renault Sport had, that when you turned in and you sort of trailed the brakes in or you lifted mid-corner, you got much more adjustability than this car has. But in terms of outright capability, bump absorption, resistance to both understeer and oversteer, this car is superior, no question. And I think it's good enough to hold its head really high in this company. It steers really nicely. There's a little bit of torque steer, but that's to be expected with this level of torque and power. The gearbox is really snicky. It's a real highlight of this car, I think, the gearbox. And when you've only got 300 odd horsepower to push you around rather than 700, you know, it's quite nice to have something else to do down the straights. It's very fast in hot hatchback terms, but with it comes, I think, a pleasingly old school level of engagement. Rather like that, I'll be honest. I rather like that.
How many times have these cars won end-of-year contests like this one? These 911 GT3s, the RSs, GT2s, they just dominate these competitions, don't they? Here we are then, this is the second generation 991 GT3. Yeah, it was the 911R that won last year. And here we are with an even more track-focused version of the 911. It all bodes very well indeed for this car, doesn't it? Here's an interesting point. This car is on the same tyres, Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s, as that M4 CS. Okay, there might be a small difference in size, small difference in compound. Fundamentally, it's the same tyre. That M4 was all over the place. It was hard work, actually. It was really, really tricky, really scary. This thing's so much easier to drive quickly. There's so much more feel. You're not guessing. You're not alarmed when it suddenly snaps sideways from out of nowhere. You know when it's going to do it. You can feel where the grip is. You can feel how much front end it's got.
The GT3 is magnificent, even in the wet, and even at sensible speeds. On the road, for example, it steers beautifully, it's compact, it has great visibility, and, fairly obviously, bags of traction. It takes all of the focus of the BMW but puts it in a lighter, more responsive, more compact package that rides, steers and handles better than, well, almost any other car on the planet.
I've left it in the softest damper setting because I want to try and find some grip in these treacherous conditions. And even in that mode, the body control is so good. This track has got lots of rises, lots of crests and compressions. The steering is beautiful. It's E-Pass, okay, so it doesn't have that same kind of pattery sensation at low speed that you got with the hydraulic rack, but the best E-Pass system I've ever come across. We've got great brakes, ceramics on this car, and the brakes just aren't wilting. You've got so much pedal feel as well. And then, if you want to, you can make the thing slide really, really easily. And it just feels so well balanced when you're in a drift. Actually, a 911, a hardcore 911, sliding like that is one of driving's most amazing sensations.
Despite everything being in the wrong place, this car just works. It does things no car with all that weight so far from the front wheel should. It will do flat out laps all day long, and you can slide it around like a GT86 if that's your thing.
Let's talk about the drivetrain. So we're up to 4 litres, and this is the first time Porsche's been able to combine a 4-litre engine with a 9,000 RPM redline. Woohoo! 9,000 RPM. When you get through 7,000, let's give it a go. So up to 7,000, 8,009, it just lights up. This PDK gearbox, it's as quick as they come. Instant gear shifts, exactly when you want them. What a drivetrain. What a drivetrain this is. So this normally aspirated flat 6, 475 horsepower, masses of performance. It's got very linear power delivery because it's not turbocharged, and it works so nicely in these conditions. Oh, that soundtrack. This engine is just spectacular. The best drivetrain out of the whole group? I think it is, isn't it? What's got a better soundtrack, a more exciting engine, more thrilling power delivery, a sharper gearbox than this thing? Nothing here. Wow. Whew. I know it's predictable, but this thing is going to take some beating.
Our next car was AMG's take on the 911 GT3. It's the AMG GT-R.
Now, when Mercedes made this thing, they made it for one reason and one reason only, and that was to punch Porsche and their GT3 square on the nose. What's it like? Well, it's got 577 horsepower, which is slightly less than we have in the E-Class. Same engine, 4-litre twin-turbo V8. Well, I say the same engine, same basic engine. This thing's got different ECU, some different internals, a different state of tune. Is it nearly, but not quite, in terms of as good as the Porsche GT3? Well, today it's going to be quite hard to tell because it is soaking wet today. It's probably not the ideal car for these conditions.
On cut slick Michelin Cup 2 tyres, the GT-R is tricky in the wet, but still so sharp and responsive. There's a bump coming out of the second chicane that upsets it on every lap, flicking it into a small slide each time. But if you can get the tyre temperatures up, the GT-R feels like a mini GT3 racing car.
I've spent quite a bit of time in this car, and I really, really enjoy them. I'm going to be honest, it's so wet today, we are not going to set any representative lap times on how capable this car is. So I'm just going to have a mess around, see how fun it is, or otherwise in these conditions. I love that noise. I'm going to turn the traction control completely off because, well, just because. Brakes feel mega. Oh, turning oversteer. God, it's nervous in the wet. You can have a bit of a play with it. Slippery, those big tyres just hunting for the water. Can I use full power? I can. Will it slow down? I don't know. Brake pedals feel really nice. The brakes in this are so much nicer than they were in that E-Class I was just in. Let's see what it's like on turning. A bit of understeer there, that's just because of the wetness. A bit of slide. Careful with the red and whites. Don't shut the power down straight away because it will snap back.
The GT-R is a truly compelling car, wider and louder and lairier than a 911 GT3, but with a distinct personality all of its own and rewarding in its own way. It's also seriously fast. It makes loads of noise and you think, is this thing all mouth and no trousers? And then you check the lap time.
Gearbox works mostly well. A couple of times it will miss its down changes. A bit of understeer through there, but that really is me carrying too much speed into the corner. Woo! Here you go, baby. This is an absolute monster of a car. What's it like over these bumps? It rides the bumps really well. Really, really well, actually. I really, really like this car. It's playful, it's fast. I love the way it looks. Nothing like as intimidating as I was expecting it to be in these wet conditions.
If the GT-R feels like a GT3 racer, there's a car here that feels more like a touring car, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio.
Which was a car developed in a really short space of time. So short, some people said it couldn't be done. But there was a bloke in charge whose project before that, I think, was the Ferrari 458 Speziale, which is not a bad thing to be going on with, is it, frankly? And I know it's a different car. This is a saloon car, that is a supercar, but you can sort of tell it's got that mark on it. The steering's really quick, 2 turns lock to lock, but with it, there's this sort of real silky smoothness, and the ride is absolutely beautifully composed on the road and around a circuit like this, uncannily smooth. This is on P0 Corsas. Now, you can also have, I think, Trofeos, which are even more race track oriented. Doesn't have a conventional limited slip diff. I think it's got this sort of Q2 differential, I suppose, with electronics and clutches, and it's quite a clever system. It means that it's more refined on the road and on turning because it doesn't lock up and exacerbate understeer. What it does is it allows the rear wheels to turn at whatever speeds they really want to, and then it only electronically hooks up under acceleration when you particularly want it to. But this is pretty well set up, frankly.
Even if you put the car into race mode, you can hit the damper button and slacken the suspension off. That makes a huge difference on a bumpy road, but on track in these very slippery conditions, it also means the Giulia finds traction and grip that other cars simply don't.
There are cars in which a wet, bumpy circuit like Castle Combe would be pretty terrifying if they had rear-wheel drive, P0 Corsas and 510 horsepower from a turbocharged engine, so when the torque kicks in, the torque fairly kicks in too. But as long as you keep things switched on, it's actually quite manageable, this car. We're in D at the moment, let's stick it into race, that firms everything up. I'll pick a corner and we'll see how it behaves.
This thing is basically a four-door Ferrari, make no mistake. The front end is sharp and it's as crisp as you could want a front axle to be. It will slide so progressively once you're used to that quick front steering rack, and turning in on the brakes only seems to exacerbate that feeling of alertness.
Quite often we invite a saloon car along to a test like this. You get to a point, you go, yeah, it's good for what it is, and then it will finish nearly last because what it is a 1.7, 1.8 ton saloon car, and a sports car unsurprisingly beats it. You just don't get that with this. I am convinced it is a better car than an M3 or an M4. I think it's the best super saloon you can buy at the moment. I prefer it to all of them. Quick Jags, quick Mercs. It's got a world-class, absolutely world-class chassis. If you've got a 250-mile journey to do in a day, some of it on motorway and some of it on lovely back roads, there's not much better than one of these on sale at the moment, and I genuinely mean that. At any price, any power, any size of car, I think this is absolutely one of the most enjoyable cars on sale. I love it to bits. It's so beautifully balanced. This car is great in all conditions. I think in conditions like this particularly, it could win. I'm having as much fun here as I suspect I will have in the fastest cars that we've got here.
From cutting-edge Italian exotica to a bathtub on wheels, built in a shed in England.
What's this test called? Autocar Handling Day. Well then this is the winner, isn't it? It's the Caterham Seven. This is what they're built to do. Okay, it's not quite that simple. But this car is fantastic around here. It's a 420 Donington Edition. One of only 10 that they're going to make. Caterham's got a new dealership at Donington Park, and these limited edition models commemorate that new dealership. Each of the 10 cars is named after a corner at Donington. This one's car number 1, and it's named after Redgate. This is a 420, which means it's got a 2-litre, normally aspirated 4-cylinder engine with 210 brake horsepower. It feels more like 400. The car's so light, it's less than 600 kilograms. So it's got so much performance. And check this out, sequential gear shift. How cool is that? Clutchless upshifts, flat on the throttle, pull back the lever, and it changes up the gear. Makes you feel like you're in a racing car. Clutch in on the way down. Does not get any better than that. Conditions are a bit better now, but it's still so slippery out here. This car's on the most aggressive tyres out of any car here. They're basically barely road legal track day tyres. They've got hardly any tread on them. You'd look at them, look at the conditions and think the car's going to be a nightmare. Do you know what? It's one of the most drivable cars here.
A Caterham might not be built for these kinds of conditions, but it is great in them nonetheless. It doesn't weigh very much, so it's really agile, and it has a linear power delivery and so much steering feel that it is the kartiest car of the bunch. You can dole out just as much power as this tiny sports car needs, which makes it great fun to drive in the wet or dry.
You know exactly what the car's doing. It's got great traction. To make it slide like that, you've got to dig right into the throttle pedal. It's got good turning grip, and of course you can feel everything that the front tyres are doing. The steering is just spectacular. It's got good cornering grip as well, and it's even got good braking grip. This car has no ABS. It should be locking up all over the place, but because it's got such great pedal feel, you don't lock up. Woohoo! With the track so slippery, you can just play about with it, make the car slide all over the place. Surely it's the most entertaining car here when the track is this wet. Right now, there's nothing else I'd rather be in.
You can't hide your mistakes in a Caterham. It's basically like going back to school. No ABS, no traction control, no windscreen even. Just perfect then. Well, maybe I'd have the windscreen, but that's it.
Woo! The engine, 210 brake horsepower at 7,600 RPM. It's a proper ripper. It's a snorty, rorty, aggressive engine. You have to use all the revs. It's a brilliant, brilliant thing. Woo! It sounds fantastic. And the car is so fast. There's no weight to it. 6th gear, 110 miles an hour. Woo! Coming down into quarry. Slippery right-hander. Get it turned in. Get on the power. And make it slide all the way to the exit. Doesn't get much better than this, guys. It's less than 50 grand, this car. It's one of the cheaper cars in this test. And you know what? It's one of the quickest cars here. And on track, it's maybe the most entertaining car here. How can you argue with that?
So from no touring to grand touring, next up is Aston Martin's DB11
V8. So if I played a little game with you, let's say we started playing the word association game, and I said to you, track car. I'd be very surprised if any one of you came back and shouted, DB11. No, not gonna happen. But let me tell you something. The chap that is now responsible for how these things handle is also the guy that was responsible for how every modern Lotus handles. And when he left Lotus and came to Aston Martin, he brought with him all of his top guys. I've got a sneaky suspicion this is gonna be a pretty good car to drive. It's wet today, it's cold, it's damp. Those conditions actually play into this car because it's quite soft, it's quite heavy, it's lighter than the E-Class that we were in earlier, but it's slightly heavier than the AMG GT-R. This thing has got 510 horsepower and 500 pounds-foot of torque. First impressions, it feels a very nice car to drive on track. It's not intimidating, it rides beautifully, the brakes feel nice. It's quick, it's 500 horsepower, it's quick in the same way that the other two were quick. And actually, I'd say that in these conditions, it is the nicer, more progressive car.
The Aston Martin is one of the 3 cars here to use the Mercedes 4-litre twin-turbo V8. It's a brilliant performance car engine with sharp throttle response and tons of power. And remarkably, Aston has made it feel like it really belongs in the DB11. The soundtrack is rich and cultured, just as you'd expect of an Aston.
The steering is nice, it's really nicely weighted, it's beautifully damped. Everything on this car is beautifully damped actually. The suspension is beautifully damped, the steering is beautifully damped, the brake pedal feel is nice, the turning is good considering the conditions. It doesn't feel as aggressive as either of the AMGs. It actually feels nicer, the damping is definitely nicer in this thing. I put that down to the chap from Lotus, I put that down to his input in the car. Oh, it's like a puddle out here. Right, you know what, I know I said it throwing it down. I'm going to turn the ESP off. Just see what we can get out of the dynamics of it. The funny thing about this track, this is an intimidating track. None of the cars I've been in today have been particularly intimidating, I have to say. It's the track. If you get it slightly wrong, there's no room for error. You've got a bit of grass and a very, very hard metal barrier. That is all you've got. Right, let's go and have a look here. Okay, so off. What's it like on the exit? Bit of power. Let's see how it slides. Yeah, we can keep hold of that. Nice breakaway. The way it regains its grip, quite progressive as well. Not bad. Not bad at all. I quite like that.
The DB11 really came into its own in these conditions. With a V8 engine in its nose rather than the V12, it's lighter, which reduces understeer and makes it far more willing to turn. But then it still has loads of torque too, and with a long wheelbase, the engine in the front and rear-wheel drive, that makes it a delightful car in which to go sideways.
Ooh, bit of a big angle there, that's cool. Yeah, they have done a great job with this car. It's not a track car, of course it's not. But in today's conditions, it works perfectly. I can't drive this car completely flat out because it's just absolutely chucking it down. The suspension works perfectly. It glides. It's absolutely wonderful. It glides, but it doesn't feel unruly. So they've done the magic thing of making a car feel like it's floating when it needs to be, but it's perfectly responsive when you want it to be. You can play, you can have a drift. Good car. I like it. Brakes are nice. Gearbox works well. It's a beast. It's a beast.
From one powerful Brit to another, the most powerful car in the test, in fact.
You joined me about 20 minutes after it has hosed down wetter than an otter's pocket, sort of hosing. Perfect conditions for a lightweight carbon fibre, highly turbocharged, 700 plus horsepower mid-engine supercar, wouldn't you say? Well, let's see. Let's deal with the things that we can deal with at any speed. Brake pedal feel is good. Steering, still hydraulic, is lovely. It feels light, it feels agile. It turns really crisply and smoothly. I've got everything on. I'm in a sort of mid-mode. Now, this is where the McLaren gets a little bit more complicated, because you have to put this panel into active mode in the first instance. So if I want aero mode, I have to push a button. I've now got, at the moment, I'm in manual, which I want. I've got my powertrain and my chassis in their middle setting. So it goes comfort, sport, track. They're in sport at the moment. Sport's probably, in the wet, about as firm as you want to make the dampers, because you want a bit of body lean to make the tyres work, so you put some weight on the outside tyres. The traction control light just sort of blinks away going, yeah, I'm just here, I'm just doing my thing, just to stop you spearing off into a wall.
Despite being so fast in a straight line and having so much cornering ability, the 720S is actually one of the most drivable cars here. It's easy to read and it has great steering.
It is fairly extraordinary. This car has got, what, 720 horsepower, 710 brake. What did the McLaren F1 have? 627? So it's got pushing on for 80 horsepower more than the McLaren F1. It's now turbocharged, quite heavily turbocharged, it's a 4-litre engine. So it's quite boosty. But in no way does that power come on too intimidatingly. Now, this is near hypercar speed. I suspect around a race circuit, if I know around a race circuit, this car is quicker than a P1, which makes it one of the fastest production cars in the world. And yet, you know, I'll just nudge up to the understeer a bit. There's a bit of oversteer. So what? It's all very, very manageable.
The 720S is not as adjustable as a GT3 once the grip has gone, mainly due to the lack of an LSD. Ride is class leading, it's even S-Class levels of good. The way it's unaffected by the big curbs on the racetrack is absolutely amazing, and the speed is otherworldly. And of course, it does have the variable drift control.
Variable drift control. Right, there we go. I've turned it up a bit. That will allow a certain degree of opposite lock before the stability control cuts in. So now my traction control light is always on, it would appear. And there it goes. And it shows you just how much traction control was working a minute ago in these conditions, because it is now just breathe on the throttle and the back brakes away. But in a very progressive fashion. It's not exactly progressive by Aston V8 DB11 standards. It shouldn't be, it's not expected to be. So that's third gear, bit of understeer, little bit of oversteer, and then it just, as long as you're steady on the throttle, it thinks you know what you're doing, it just opens up the taps a bit, and even down the straight there, just as the boost comes on, it lets it step out a little bit. I think what's remarkable about this car is that these are really not the conditions for it. And yet, here I am, having more fun than you would necessarily expect. There is no question this is a world-class supercar at any speed, apparently in any conditions.
The McLaren 720S is also one of the most track-focused cars here. Once the circuit had dried, the 720S put its clever active aero, sublime chassis and neck-snapping 710 brake horsepower to good use, setting a time of 1 minute 11.6 seconds. Its lap time would not be beaten.
We set lap times at Combe, but don't read too much into them. We do them just because we can, rather than because they have any effect on our verdicts. The conditions were a bit changeable, with the AMG GT-R still posted an incredibly respectable time given how wet it was when we tested it. The Civic was the slowest car tested, but don't forget, our verdict is not about the overall lap time. What's more interesting than that is that the Civic's corner speeds were as high as any other car here.
These are the 9 best performance cars of the year, but we're here to put them in an order, and that means one of them has to come last. In 9th position, it's the BMW M4 CS. The CS is a huge improvement on the standard M4, but it just did not work in these conditions. In 8th, it's the Mercedes-AMG E63 S. The E63 is a game changer for fast estate cars, but in this sort of test, there's just no escaping its weight. In 7th place, it's the second of the two Mercedes, the AMG GT-R. I'm sure the GT-R would have performed better in dry conditions, but as it was, it just wasn't suited to a wet Castle Combe.
6th position then goes to the Honda Civic Type-R. It may not be a podium finish, considering the competition, the Civic Type-R can go home with his head held high. The Caterham and the Alfa share 4th. Think about that for a sec. A 4-door saloon, as good to drive on track as a car that is designed to do nothing but that. Well done, Alfa Romeo.
And so to the top 3. In 3rd place, well and truly making the most of the conditions, is the Aston Martin DB11, with its benign handling balance and endearing V8 engine, making it a lovely car to drive. The McLaren 720 S and Porsche 911 GT3, meanwhile, would have come out on top whatever the conditions. The 720S in 2nd place is a belter, faster than even McLaren's own P1 hypercar. It's an example of what you can do if you keep a car as light as possible and give it, well, loads of power. But it's fun at normal speeds too. Some of our judges thought it could even have pinched the overall victory.
So there you have it, 2017's best driver's car, according to us, is the Porsche 911 GT3.
Yeah.
Happy?
Absolutely happy. Yeah, I think it's a mighty, mighty car again from the Porsche Motorsport division. What a surprise, eh? I had to think long and hard about any vices, anything I didn't like about this car. When it was really wet yesterday, the Cup 2 tyres were out of their depth. But even then, the car was drivable, it was manageable, it was fun. It's mega.
Yeah, some engine as well.
Yeah.
Mate, what do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a mega bit of kit. It's an assault on the senses, it's fast, it was just so much fun to drive, and it's the sort of car that just eggs you on. It's so engaging. The only thing that I wasn't so blown away by was the engine over the last 1,000 RPM. So between 8 and 9, it just sounds like it's got that last 1,000 RPM just for the sake of having it. It's just a little bit harsh, but other than that, yeah, that's a small criticism, but other than that, it's an absolutely fantastic, deserving winner.
All right, so beyond the obvious winner, what has impressed you?
The McLaren, the 720S, was absolutely fantastic. There's a delicacy to how it drives and how it goes about its business. It's so fast. It's by far the quickest thing here. And I love the Giulia as well. The Giulia is absolutely fantastic. It does feel like a 4-door Ferrari. I know it's a cliche, but that is the truth.
The other cars that stood out for me were the Aston Martin. I thought, particularly in the wet yesterday on circuit, it was really good, and in the dry on track, it's still pretty entertaining. It just makes me think, how brilliant is the Vantage going to be? Smaller, shorter, lighter, more focused chassis. Yeah. The other car that I had a lot of fun in, as you could tell from my little segment in it, was the Caterham. Particularly on a greasy circuit, there's just nothing like a 7 to fling around a wet track.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Our marketing people call that a call to action, you know. And join us every week here or on autocar.co.uk for more motoring shenanigans.